about myself. So without self-discipline, it seems to me, self-esteem is only one wing that by itself cannot fly. I remember years and years ago, my kids were in the Little League finals and we lost, but everybody got a trophy just for a participation trophy. And my kids felt this is just bogus. I'd rather not get a trophy and practice harder, train harder, and compete again next year and see how we fare. But just everybody's a winner. Everybody gets a trophy. Sounded lovely. But to my kids, it just sounded kind of lame and inauthentic. So it'll be in a certain way, personal, my talk today, because there's many ways that myself I tend to tap into in the effort to cultivate self-discipline. And maybe in our conversation today, we'll be able to highlight some of those, of which there's so many, and each person has to find his or her own way. One thing that's amazing is there's one book that's been on the bestsellers list for like, I don't know, 2-3 years now. Either number 1, number 2, then it'll slip to number 4, but then it's number 1 again. This guy must be a wealthy man from this one book called Atomic Habits. Maybe some of you've heard of it or read it even. I see one nod from yourself, Rhonda, but it's such a simple book, but sometimes the greatest wisdom is in simplicity. So I'll be maybe alluding to that book down the pike a bit. But what I thought we'd start with is a contemplation that I'd entitled Start with Why, W-H-Y. Before we start the practice, I would just say that there was a book written by Simon Sinek by that name, Start with Why. And I think in part his thesis is, unless we have that why driving the bus, nothing's really going to stick. So as opposed to, for example, if we're, let's say, interested in fitness, where's the best place to go? Or how's the best way to lose weight? Or which book is he'd say the first question has to be a why question. Why do you want to? And fill in the blank. So I thought we'd start with why contemplation and take it from there. So let's come to a comfortable seated position with your feet on the floor and your hands resting comfortably in your laps. And just taking a moment just to get grounded, to ride the waves of the breath. And just assuming our seat. Sitting here with a wakeful and calm awareness. A penetrative and discerning receptivity. So the question becomes, the contemplation is, start with why. So as we sit here in the stillness, there might be something that you'd like to change, amend, or add to in terms of your life, in terms of perhaps well-being, fitness, relationship related, spiritual practice. But as opposed to the who, what, where kind of question, let's start with why. And in the stillness, what is your own personal why? This is why I want to, and then fill in the blank. Appreciating that the most fundamental question has to be why? What is animating this desire that I have? And if your why seems rather casual or maybe a bit superficial or rushed to come up with an answer, you're welcome to sit with that. And see if your why can drop even deeper. How deep can your why go? Sort of like taking a little pebble and dropping it into a deep well. And early on, you might have a response. But see if you could take that and drop even deeper into that question. In many spiritual traditions, and certainly in the Jewish tradition, one way to really access that answer is in contemplating one's mortality and what you'd want it to say as your epitaph on your tombstone. What a great way to fine tune what your why in life is. Well, this is what I want written about me on my tombstone. What would that be? Or similarly, if you could be a fly in the wall at your own funeral, what eulogies would you want them to deliver? What would you want for them to say about you, about me? So that's kind of a way of really shaking things out, starting with why. If our sense of why is just a very casual one, then the chances of it leading to enduring, serious behavioral change will be dubious, non-sustainable. But to the degree to which we really are attuned to what our why is all about, as firmly, as resolutely as possible, then that behavioral change has a much higher chance of sticking. And I would also say that start with why. It's the kind of question that we should just ask ourselves once. And then after it's been answered, okay, I'm good now. It's the kind of question, I believe, that we need to keep asking and re-asking ourselves on a very regular and consistent basis. In my own field, every one of my students is wonderful. And no doubt, once upon a time, asked themselves, well, why do I want to go into medicine? It's a lot of work, a lot of effort. And no doubt at some point they entertain that question, which is wonderful. But how often do they revisit again and again and again that question? You're never done asking. And of course, each person's why could be so different, so personalized. But usually the why has less to do with financial success, and usually themes such as love, loyalty, service, the divine. We'll just take another 60 seconds sitting with this start with why contemplation. So if your eyes were closed, allow them to open and to come back to the room. And before we move on, I'd love to hear from you guys, really. Should anyone wish to share it, I'd love to hear it. In terms of start with why, what was this kind of experience, this practice, this contemplation like for you? What was that experience like? What came up? But don't forget to unmute.
At first, I was a little confused because at this point in my life, I don't think of, there comes a point in life when you're not really sure you're going to have another year. So you don't make resolutions for that year. And so I just sat with not knowing for a while. And the more you asked me to go deeper, the more I recognized what would matter to me if I have 5 more years or 10 more years or 5 days or 5 months. And and things just dropped away. Things just dropped away. And I finally got to that if I could truly love God and love my neighbor in the years that are left to me, that would be the only thing that would really mean I had accomplished what my intention was. So I thank you for that, because I wouldn't have said that, 15 minutes ago. I didn't know that 15 minutes ago.
What you're saying is stunning. we don't know how much time we have left. None of us know. And there's always terrible stories. Someone was crossing the street with all these wonderful plans and, a drunk driver or a brick falls off of a construction site built. We just don't know. One of my favorite books, Catherine, was by an author, Stephen Levine. I always loved his stuff. And one of his books was entitled A Year to Live. And he just picked a year, January 1st, and he pretended this is my last year. And now we're into February and March. It's getting closer and closer. But in his preface to the book, he said it would even be, in a certain way, presumptuous for me to assume that I have a year to live. Right. Who knows what we have? So what you say was remarkable, Catherine, because, you said, well, I don't know if I want to make a New Year's resolution because who knows if we have a year? But even if we have one day, how loving can I be today?
I think that's what I came to, is it doesn't matter if I have a day or a year or, 25 years. I have relatives who live to be 100, so I might have a bit more than I think. Anyway, so.
I know in a type of psychotherapy referred to as ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, they draw a big distinction between goals and values. Because goals and how they differ, a goal is something that you set your sights on and it could be fulfillable. And once it's fulfillable, you're done. My goal is to get into, law school. You got in. All right, my goal is satisfied. But a value is never done. Like you said, if your value is to be loving in your relationship to God and loving to your fellow man, that's not a goal. Oh, I was so loving. I'm done now. I was so loving. I could just go to Miami and just retire now. Wow, was I awesome? If it's a value, it's never satisfied. It's forever driving you for however long we are blessed to be on this planet. So starting with why, I think, is more value-based than goal-based, I believe.
Thank you.
Anybody else or anybody else's cat that would like to share? Please, Rhonda.
Hi. Thank you. I mean, it's just this first 20 minutes of this is already worthwhile and enlightening to me. And I am in New York. I live in New York, but I have friends in Arkansas, and I have had the deep joy of visiting the Arkansas House of Prayer. So thank you for that. And what I've been thinking about is health and fitness, and that is, and the why, I started with the kind of obvious question that I want to be healthy. Why? Well, so I can feel good every day, so I can be fully, actively productive and present and loving and do everything that's important to me every day. And also for, God willing, many years into the future. And I feel, as Dr. Harris knows, that as a Jewish person, observant Jews, the first thing we do when we open our eyes in the morning is we thank God for opening our eyes. And then we say about 100 other prayers during the day to express gratitude, or we can. So, when I wake up every day and I thank God for opening my eyes, I want to feel, wow, I can really enjoy this day and do things to make the world a better place and do acts of kindness and do things for my pleasure. So that's that's really went through my head.
Well, you said a lot, Rhonda, and I thank you. To try to unpack everything that you said remarkably, but in a condensed way. Well, we it's crazy here in America today. Everybody is feels like it, or is overweight, unhealthy, stressed, sleep deprived, and I believe it was just very recent that they published the annual statistic of American life expectancy, and for the first time ever, it dropped by 2 years, which should shock every one of us and should have shocked every single doctor. But we've barely said a peep about that. I think because we're so part of the society that we haven't been able to step out of that and say, this is insane. With all the healthcare, with all the resources that life expectancy is dropping, should shock us. But it's true. I mentioned that it might be more personal in certain ways, would have to say, because to get real, I suppose I have to. But for my own health quest, it was a few years ago. I would just every now and then just check my blood pressure and pulse, just to, I don't know, it's good to know. And it was okay-ish, but I just noticed, oh, it's kind of creeping up. My blood pressure was, it wasn't horrific, but what's going on? My resting heart rate was, what's going on? So I went to employee health, and the doctor took my pulse, took my blood pressure, and he said, I looked at the numbers, and for a man your age, this is totally normal. So when I heard, for a man your age, forget it. I know this is a religious organization, and so I won't tell you the response that I had in my brain, but it wasn't a flattering one towards that doctor. It was, your age, don't we? It was sort of like, said, the new American Heart Association parameters are that at this age, that's just considered normal. We don't even treat it anymore. But I thought in my mind, that might be normal, but it's not optimal. And I just felt the way you do, Rhonda, and so how you articulated it, Catherine, that I don't know how much time the good Lord has decreed that I be on this planet, but I do know that I want to do everything in my power to stack the deck in my favor and not hasten my demise, because I just see life as the greatest gift ever. And why squander it? Or why truncate it? Doctors are doing an amazing job at helping prolong lifespan, but not health span. And I don't want doctors to keep me alive an extra 10 years, but 10 more years where I'll be severely suffering from dementia and incontinence and be, bedridden for the last 10 years of my life. I just don't see that as something I'd be thrilled about. And part of my why was then and remains, life's a great blessing. Life's the greatest blessing, the greatest joy, the greatest gift. And why would I want to squander it? That, like Catherine, I feel so blessed to have so many people in my life that I love so dearly that I just want to be there as long as I can to love them and to enjoy them and maybe teach my children or grandchildren, or just be a role model of sorts, and to be there for my wife. And it's kind of funny in a certain way, Rhonda, that it's a bit of a paradox, but the things that we should be most grateful for, we tend to take for granted. So if we get a new car, oh, wow, I'm so grateful, I got a new car. But what about the fact that all of us on this call today obviously went to bed last night, but woke up alive today. And we just took that for granted. Oh, yes, all right, let's get to work, next day. But no, there were millions of people who went to bed last night who did not wake up this morning. So that, Rhonda, when you said in the Jewish faith, the first words we utter in the morning are modeh ani, or the feminine would be moda ani lefanecha, gratitude before you, God, that you've returned my soul with compassion. How great is your faith in me? It's a new day, another gift. So it just seems that the greater the gift, the inverse relationship, we just take it for granted, which is crazy. It makes no sense at all. So I think there's different whys for each and every person, but they almost universally have to do with love, entering your life as deeply as possible, and doing whatever it takes to sustain that. But most doctors don't talk much about that. I hate to say it. Lifestyle medicine is a huge interest of mine. Nutrition, stress reduction. Mostly in our field, we just prescribe medications. And the average patient over age 65 is on between 8 and 12 different types of medication daily. And we don't think twice about that, doctors. We just dutifully prescribe them all without pausing and saying, what's that about? So partly these start with why can impact lifestyle medicine, our well-being, our nutrition, getting to the gym, etc. It was for me. So thank you for that. Anyone else? I think you're trying to speak, but I think you might have to unmute. Uh-oh.
I was just going to say my experience was once you opened and invited us to the why question.
Yeah.
It was kind of this spaciousness that kind of opened up for me. It was like all this little stuff that I've been kind of tinkering with, toying with, worrying about all day. All of a sudden, it just kind of dropped away. And the why just gave me a lot of room, you might say, a lot of room within my heart and mind. And so it was an opening kind of an experience. And it makes me realize that sometimes when I do is I get too focused on what I call the little stuff that seems so important. And then my world just gets smaller and smaller. And I can't really see the great gift that life is. So thank you.
Well, you put it beautifully. I love that word you used, spacious. And perspective you were talking about. You see we can get so hung up with, we forget the forest for the trees. I actually had heard a lovely story that you just jogged my memory with regards to, Sister Deborah, that I had heard the author of that book speak, and he told a lovely story. That the author was a consultant for, he consults for businesses and, industrial psychology and the likes, and making firms more productive. So he was a consultant for Disneyland. And one of the people invited to share was his nickname. He didn't even know when he picked that person, was Ice Chips. That everybody on his team couldn't stand this person and just saw him as the coldest, rigid, uptight, horrible. But somehow when the author chose, he just, as luck would have it, it's all divinely ordained, of course, but as luck would have it, he picked this gentleman. And everyone said, oh no, he's going to get nowhere with this guy. So this man was talking about what drove him and his team, which was that the very first time he was involved with Disney, and he saw a father with his son in a wheelchair. But then it hit him that Disney felt like the only place on this planet where people don't see father and son in a wheelchair. They only see father and son, period. And this man started tearing up, and all the people in attendance were like in shock to hear this. And they were all in tears. As he was saying, after seeing that and seeing that all this is a father and his son, period. Not father and son, wheelchair, father and son who's disabled. No. He said, I just devoted myself, my life, my mission to making sure that that's exactly what we deliver. So everybody in the room's in tears. But maybe this man didn't share with his team the why. So they always thought he was just this uptight, rigid, controlling, nasty, whatever person. But after they heard his why, it transformed everything. And when this author would go, to reconsult or just follow up, the whole team was on board. And whenever he was, as meticulous in his demands, they loved it because they got it. And it's not like every minute they had to hear his story. He shared with them his why. And then it all just made sense. So you're right, Sister Deborah, how we could so lose sight of the forest for the trees and get caught up in details. But if we make space and see that broader narrative, just everything takes a different complexion. It just makes sense. And they just got it after that. His whole team revered the man, a man that they hated and used derisive names towards. They just revered the man and became faithfully his employees eternally, hearing what his why at its root was. Any other, Dale, take it away.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I thought you were going to say something, Dale.
Yes, I was. Can you hear me?
Yes, before you were on mute, now you're not.
Okay, I was muted. I have trouble with the decision making in my life, and you think that that's has nothing to do with fulfillment of life, but it does a lot. I think it springs from my childhood, and because I have trouble with that, it consumes too much of my time. Because I'll say, oh, after I make a choice, oh, I could have made another choice. Why didn't I do that? In that I should be spending that time with other thoughts, more positive than doubting myself. And I did find out a couple of years ago I have Parkinson's disease, but I don't have any shakes or anything yet. I take kickboxing classes 3 times a week.
Wow.
And keep in shape, and it does help a lot. But anyway, going back to my problem, I asked the Lord for 3 things for me. One is decision making, that I'm able to do that. Another is letting go of things, detachment. And the third is free from fear, being free from all fear. And so those are my requests to the Lord from my personal being. And I think if I could get this, like you mentioned something about a car. I did buy a car yesterday.
Nothing the matter with that.
And I went to this one place, and I fully intended to go to more than one place. But I wound up settling at this one place for this nice car, a little bit too expensive, but the insurance company took care of it. But then I got to thinking, why didn't I go to a second place and explore their options? Because of a few things that were maybe lacking in this car. But that is something that kind of takes over in my life that I hate. And I ask the Lord to help me with this. And when I mess up, I ask the Lord, why? I've been asking you to help me for a long time. Why can't I conquer this? So anyway, that's.
Well, you're saying important things. And maybe we'll segue to the next phase of what I wanted to do that speaks directly to that, if I might. That after starting with why requires behavioral change. And let me say a few words once again, and then we'll do a contemplation. So I would have to say, for starters, that once one really has that kind of why more fully or strongly ingrained within, requires then commitment to take action.
Mm-hmm.
A lovely book is called, a couple of books, one I mentioned already. Another one is called Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg. And his whole thing is just start super, super, super tiny, as opposed to these are my goals and I'm going to, that failed. So he says, see how absolute tiny you can make that change. And then feel good about it. High five yourself or celebrate it in some way. And then maybe take it a bit further. And do it so tinily, I don't know if it's even a word, but incrementally, in such minute ways. So we set ourselves up for success, not for failure. And if we're ever reading and learning and then implementing, maybe that's the wisdom in that book, Atomic Habits. I'm not sure how much I learned in reading it versus just deeply validating those things that just made sense to me.
Can you say the name of that book again, please?
The first was called, I mentioned just before, was called Tiny Habits. Mm-hmm. The second, Atomic Habits. And I guess he said that atoms are tiny, right? But we know the power of atomic power. It's a bit of a dialectic. So something that's seemingly so minute, atomically minute, is infinitely potent and powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of behavioral design, a nice example for me is, it's amazing how, I don't know, there's a certain mental friction, inertia. So for example, there was a point, maybe it was during COVID, I thought, it's an opportunity to go in and I'd like to improve my guitar playing. I always loved the blues. But how long would it take for me to go over to my closet, open the closet door, take the guitar out, open the case, and play? Mm-hmm. 60 seconds at most. And yet there's something about that. Oh, get up. Oh, I have to open the closet door. Oh man, I have to open the case, those little things, you have to do 3 of them. And oh man, I'll just put on the TV. So it's crazy how the mind works. And I hope I'm not offering too much information, what kids call TMI, but I feel comfortable doing that because I think that's just the nature of mind, this kind of stickiness, this kind of inertia. So the best advice I got from a friend of mine, here's what you do for $10. Order yourself a guitar stand. So my guitar is always out. It's right next to my bed. So if I'm lazy and just lying in bed, I don't have to even, I have to get up and walk to the closet. I don't know how that's, so, I'm lying there, I'm lazy, I just reach and there it is. I don't even have to lean like a millimeter. And there's my guitar. It's staring at me 24/7. And I'm just trying to behaviorally design my environment to stack the deck in my favor. And I think one of his premises is then that people who are successful in implementing behavioral change versus those who are less successful isn't that one group are hardworking and the other are lazy, God forbid. It's more that one group has a certain behavioral design in place that's going to promote the good stuff. And the latter doesn't have a system that they've incorporated. Or another example for myself, going to the gym is something I value. But if I got up in the morning and, where's my sneakers? And, so before I go to bed, my system is before I go to bed, get the gym bag, make sure it's all packed. It's right by the front door. So it's not like I forgot my bag on. So I have a certain behavioral design or behavioral system. So it's not that I'm more disciplined than anybody else, but I've tried to set up a behavioral design that will promote the good stuff. And sometimes they're just no-brainers. Like, all right, invest $10 in a guitar stand. And yet, it was brilliant advice I was given. It's staring at me all the time. And if I'm just feeling lazy or I'm feeling, bored or restless, I just reach, let me just grab that guitar and, noodle around with it for a minute or two. So it's embracing that mental state that we have, but then working with that truth to our advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we'll do a practice in just a second, but I remember once hearing, there was a famous business consultant. He was sort of, the most famous in the field, perhaps. His name was Peter Drucker. And major corporations would pay him huge amounts of money to come and figure out what was the catch. Why was the team not succeeding as they had wished? So they'd have him come in for a week, and he was apparently a very dynamic speaker and would wow the team participants. But always at the end of his close, maybe Friday afternoon at the end of a week where he'd be the consultant, he'd almost universally close by saying, to the degree to which you were wowed by this week or inspired or deeply moved by means nothing to me. What is germane to me is Monday morning, big or small, what are you going to do differently? If you told me you were totally, wow, what a week, I was so inspired, but Monday morning, saying that it was a waste, that you were inspired is meaningless. So whatever inspiration you did or didn't exact from this, what's going to be different Monday morning? Maybe I should have said that at the end of my talk to summarize as but there it is, and I think there's great wisdom in that. All the deep emotion and inspiration, if it's not translated into what we do in our lives, it's just falls short. So let's come to a seated position once again. We'll do a contemplation. Once again, just taking a moment to drop into the breath, that sense of groundedness. Not only are we sitting, but we're taking our seat, the same way one will take a stand in life. That's what we're doing now while seated, taking our seats. and taking a bit of time to identify something that you'd like to change, that you'd either want to stop doing or something that you'd like to incorporate doing in your life. So let's take a moment to do that kind of mental survey. And once again, making it as tiny as you like. So we're really aiming for success. And success always breeds more success. So what tiny thing, what tiny change might we contemplate? Or what one thing, tiny as it might be, might we eliminate from doing? In his book, Tiny Habits, he talked about committing to just using his dental floss and flossing just one tooth. And then celebrating when he achieved that. But the commitment in of itself can fall short without, we mentioned A, that it be tiny, but that B, there be as much detail as possible. When, where, how, filling it up with all the details that you can. In terms of anticipating this behavior, what problems, what pitfalls might I encounter, and then what? Or perhaps linking that behavior to something that you do all the time automatically anyway, which is easy, and then linking this new thing to that. So as rich as you can in details. And in sitting here, recognizing the total night and day difference between the word trying and deciding. I'm a big fan, as I mentioned, of acceptance and commitment therapy. And that way of thinking, the word try is pretty much meaningless. If someone told you, try to pick up that pen, either you do or you don't. I don't know what that would look like. Trying to pick up a pen or trying to anything. So in the behavior, large or small, and optimally tiny, seeing the degree to which as we sit here, there's a sense of having made up a decision. In Yiddish, they call it a hachlata, or in Hebrew, hachlata. It's a decision that you're really trying to commit yourself to, that you're not going to simply try. So if your eyes were closed once again, allowing them to open and to come back to the room. It's nice how we sit in meditation or posture, that our posture should capture a sense of resoluteness, of dignity, of determination, of open-heartedness. That body posture kind of promotes the process we go through, just how we sit, parenthetically. Well, love to hear from you guys once again, what this part of the practice was like. Take it away, Catherine. Go for it, Catherine, but unmute.
It was difficult for me because the thing that I wanted to change was that at the end of my day, I seemed to just dawdle around. So it can take me 2 hours to take a shower, put on my pajamas, brush my teeth. And so I couldn't find any place to hold on to something tiny. So I cheated. I went back to why. And what I discovered is that I didn't know why I would want to make it different. Why would I, not want to dawdle around? And I realized that what was missing was a sense of gratitude for the day that I had that had been given to me, whether it was problematic, one thing after another, whether it was an easy day, whether there were beautiful surprises or disappointing or hard surprises, but whatever, it was the day that had been given to me, that God had given to me, and that what would make the difference in the way I ended it was gratitude. And then it wouldn't matter if I dawdled a bit or didn't dawdle a bit, because what was missing was not focused speediness, but what was missing was gratitude. So I'm very interested in seeing what will happen if at the end of today, when it comes time to put down the books and the papers and close the computer, and how it will be different if I do a quick review of gratitude, maybe not even review, just the tiny thing would be just express gratitude, feel gratitude for the day.
Well, I like the way you ended that with something tiny.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In that period, can I pause even for 5 seconds to drop into gratitude.
Right.
I was also going to say something as well, if I might, Catherine, that the value of spiritual journaling, diary, writing, or journaling. It goes in waves for me, where I'm really on top of my game. And then for a while, I might slip a bit. But I always go back to it. And I think the reason I like journaling, and maybe it's different than a diary, because a diary would be a lengthy, here's my feelings, my emotions, and long entries, which I don't have time, or I don't really have the interest to do that, meritorious as it could be. So my journaling is so boring that if anyone just found it, they'd say, oh my God, this is the most boring person in the world. Because mostly it would be, what time do I want to get up in the morning to make sure I have enough time for my morning meditation, my morning workout? At what point in the day, so I like to give myself generally every day to meditation, physical exercise, and spiritual study. But it's so easy to lose sight of time, and I'm late for work, and etc. That I found it enormously helpful for me to, in my journaling, to try to figure it out. What time do I need to get up at?
Mm-hmm.
And then once I've made that determination to, not just try, but stick with it, I think what was eye-opening for me was many years ago. I used to always, go to bed in the morning. My snooze alarm would go, and I hit the snooze alarm a bunch of times, and eventually drag myself out of bed. But I remember one time it was a very, very early flight. Let's say if there's a 7 a.m. flight, but doesn't sound crazy, but you got to get up at like 4:30, I don't know, whatever, for that. But as soon as my alarm clock went off, I was up, because, you don't want to miss a flight. That'd be a disaster. But then I asked myself, how come every morning I hit that snooze alarm a whole bunch of times and say, well, you know what, you work hard and you deserve it. You have to be gentle with yourself. Well, hit that snooze alarm just once more. But how come for the airplane, I was up, but for the Lord and for my prayers, well, snooze alarm. Well, and so who's more important? My prayer life or catching that flight? And it was more my journaling that I found myself having to be brutally honest with myself, because it's right there I'm sort of stepping outside of myself. Journaling is like a meditative exercise. You're stepping out of yourself to look at yourself. So much of my journaling is dry, but in a good way. I mean, if I want to do X, Y, or Z, all right, when am I going to do it? What time? At what time do I set my alarm? At what point in the day am I going to go to the gym? And just that orderliness. Sister Deborah mentioned Mussar, that Jewish path in terms of studying virtuous character traits. And in terms of orderliness, that was sort of, I heard a lovely metaphor. It was the metaphor used by my father-in-law's master in pre-war Europe. And he likened it to pearl beads. And, the pearls could include generosity, loving kindness, beneficence, and on and on. And at the very little back there's this little clasp, which is probably worth like, a penny. And it certainly has no comparable value to all those spectacular pearls. However, if that clasp in the back breaks, well, what happens to all those pearls? that are scattered and of no use to anybody. So I too am guilty of when I get home and I make myself a coffee and then I this and then I that and then so a lot of my own journaling really speaks to structuring my day. If I have those 2 hours, what would I have wanted to do perhaps instead? And at what time would I say I'm finished with the, fixing up in the kitchen a bit? At what point am I committing to whatever it is I wish to do? So that's something I try to work with, to counter that kind of,
Yeah, I like that idea a lot. To make some structure to the next day before you go to sleep at the end of the previous day. I like that.
And then beginning that new day like Rhonda said, with gratitude.
Right.
Wow, a new day. I'm all set to go. Anyone else in terms of doing this second contemplation?
I just, when we did the why, I kind of, the thing that I thought of was trying to know that I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be doing. I'm in the right place where God wants me to be, or that I have a purpose, I guess. And figuring that out now in my later years is kind of hard. And I have problems. I was always kind of a night person, and now it's like 3 a.m. before I get to bed. And I miss a lot of the day. And I think that, like this morning, I had to go to church. I had to take things. I set my alarm, but the small things I could do, I feel that I waste a lot of time because I do spend too much time on the computer. I try to go to exercise classes and things like that, and do some volunteer work, but it's so scattered sometimes, and I've kind of lost the sense of what is the right thing. I kind of do the next thing that shows up, and trying to figure out how to bring some order into my life, I guess, and I can, like you, I can get up if I know I have a task to do in the morning. I can set the alarm and I can do it. But left to my own devices, I waste a lot of time every day, and it gets later and later. I don't know if I will be eventually 6 a.m. when I get to bed and kind of ruin the whole day. But it used to be midnight. Now it's about 3. So kind of incrementally, I think I can, I read different things about how to become a morning person, and, incrementally kind of move up things like that. And I was thinking of that I can kind of set goals, I guess, of getting little things done to make myself get up and get moved, and not stay up so late, not spend so much time wasting it on computers and crossword puzzles and whatever, fiddling around.
Yeah, well, we've kind of come full circle, because I think just as we were stalling for people to come on, it was just like 2 minutes before 3 o'clock here in New York, 2 in Central Time. And we were just chatting, and I think it fell into the topic of, each of us, we all have our smartphones now, or computers, and the degree to which it's addictive is horrifying. I think it was just that recently I saw a Netflix special on that. Can't remember the name of it, but just all the insiders, and they knew they were creating an addictive product, and were deliberately making it in such a way that it was addictive. And my comment of earlier was, at least we're in the call today old enough to remember what normal had been like. But young children today, they are just born into this. And will they even have a fighting chance? I don't know. But even for us, I could just speak for myself. It's so addictive so addictive that if I just allowed for things to come my way, it was an expression used a little bit like that, whatever presents itself, doesn't speak to agency. I'm sort of the victim of whatever emerges and has sway over me. But especially with computers and social media and how addictive it is, I think it really does demand this kind of planning, maybe journaling, strategizing. In Jewish practice, the word is tachpulot, which I think just translates as strategies or devices. So, and what a strategy might be, no matter what, at 10 p.m., my computer shuts down, no matter what, I turn it off. And well, let me see one more thing, let me go on Amazon, do a little more shopping, or social media, that without a warp design ahead of time, we're goners. And if we just become victim of those circumstances, they've designed it, they've rigged the game, and there's always a pop-up and wow, how did YouTube know that I loved the Allman Brothers, which I do. And all of a sudden there's all these Allman Brothers videos popping up. And then from there, it took me to golf. How did they know I love golf? They know more about me than I know about me, and it's terrifying. So unless we have these tachpulot, these strategies, we're going to surrender our agency.
I know every night I have to consider, let's put my kickboxing stuff together, my boxing gloves and my water and everything. Then I have a tussle with what do I set my alarm for? If I set it early enough, I'll have 15 or 20 minutes of contemplative prayer. Or if I set it earlier than that, I'll be able to snooze once and then have enough time to get up. I have to give it some, and it's a little battle I have because I hate to get up in the morning. So,
well, let me ask you a good question then, Dale. When do you make that decision which one you're going to do? Ahead of time or just on the spur of the moment? How do you feel going out?
Right before I go to bed at night.
You do?
Yes. So, I have to think, I can't mess up then because I can't miss my class. And yet, if I'd set it early enough, I'll be able to snooze and get up early enough for contemplative prayer. So if I don't set it early enough, I won't get to snooze. This sounds like a ridiculous conversation with myself, but it's what happens.
I don't see it as ridiculous. I think this is where the rubber hits the road in this planning, in these details, as opposed to, let me just wake up and figure out if I have time for my contemplative prayer or not. I guess not today. Too bad. That's, so it may sound trivial what you just said, but not at all. That's how the good stuff happens. If you don't go through that stuff the night before, the good stuff, the contemplative prayer, may or may not even happen. You're leaving that to chance. But it's too important to be left to chance.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how, what Brenda was talking about, how could that be translated into a tiny step that would be satisfying to you, Brenda, to know that you had accomplished something? I don't know if that's the point of having it be a tiny step or.
Well, part of what I think Dale just said was that her tiny step was the night before, she decides exactly how she's going to set their alarm. Set the alarm. I'm good. She didn't do that little slide, that little thing, and her alarm is set. I don't know, maybe she'd sleep in and miss it all. But it seems to me from what Dale's saying that her prayer, her time with the Lord is invaluable to her and shouldn't be missed. So that tiny step might not be the deep, deep prayer, but it might just be, my alarm's good. And you made up your mind the night before. Well, I'm a little bit fatigued. I'll set it up so I like that snooze, that extra just chilling in bed. But you've made your mind up ahead of time, not on the spur of the moment where, something else is driving the bus. But the tiny step might be every night before I go to bed, I set my alarm to the time that I feel is what I need. I better want to put words in your mouth, Dale, forgive me, but maybe, what are your thoughts about the tiny step and all that?
What you said is correct, yes. It's very important for me to do it the night before because I know how hard it is to wake up in the morning for myself. And if I get up, sometimes I'll wake up around 3 or 4 o'clock and I go ahead and say my contemplative prayer then. And but if I don't do it, I pretty well listen to the alarm clock and make it out of bed in time.
And you've also set up the other small thing you did is the night before your kit box, gear, etc., is all packed up and ready to roll.
Yes, and it's important because it's fighting Parkinson's that way, with the exercise. So yes, everything has to be done planned ahead of time, or I fail. And
you're cultivating a fighting spirit. That's what it really is. It's not about the kicking or the punching. It's that mindset of a fighting spirit for life.
Right. Could make a lot of difference in my future.
Anyone else in terms of that exercise? Anyone else? Yeah, take it away, Rhonda.
Now, I actually, if you don't mind, I had something I wanted to say to Dale about your decision making. And I think I've had a lot of that problem, and it continues. And I found for me, and I don't know if this is where it comes from you, is that it's kind of striving to be a perfectionist. And I learned a phrase some years ago, and I try to remind myself of that. And the phrase is, perfect is the enemy of the good. So if that's the problem, that you make a decision and you're concerned, oh, is it the perfect decision? Could I have made a better decision? We want to have good lives. I know, I don't know about anybody else, but I don't aim for a perfect life, or I don't aim for perfection in myself or in others. And that helps me, that phrase.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I thought we'd close with one final sit. How does that sound? And with a quote. I always love poems and quotes. So let's come to a comfortable seated position once again. And as I'm pulling up this quote on my smartphone, I don't trust my memory, but already I'm seeing pop-ups, and it's such an addiction. So this is a quote I think that will be heavily germane. But let's just pause for a second, again, dropping into the breath. This is a very well-known quote attributed to Viktor Frankl, that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So once again, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And I think the wisdom in life then is, how much can we broaden that space? Sometimes it just feels like a hair trigger response between stimulus and then how we respond. But how much can we etch out a space there? In that space is our power to choose our response. So once we make contact with the possibility of there being space, suddenly there's the possibility of the power to choose. Why I find that so liberating is that even if I've done something a million times, stimulus, response, and that's just my habitual response already. I've done this my whole life. But even if that's so, and we've done something the same way tens of thousands of times, but in this one moment, in this one breath, in that recognizing that there is that space, and no matter how many times we might have fallen into that same old trap or responded the same way, but in this one moment, this one breath, we have this enormous power to choose. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Meaning, even if we've been slaves to that same response, that same habit, again and again, but at any moment, we could waken from that, drop into that space, maybe just that one in-breath to give us that sense of space, or that capacity just to drop into the body and just inhabit our bodies in that moment. And know that and affirm that there's a certain power we have to choose. And ultimately, in that response can lie our growth and our freedom. So it's deeply liberating, no matter what I've done or how many times I've messed up and who hasn't messed up. But at this one moment, this one breath, I could be liberated. And I think it's deeply wise what Dr. Frankl, a survivor of Auschwitz, no less, is teaching us about personal freedom and personal liberation, no matter what, no matter what. So if your eyes were closed, once again, you're welcome to open them and come back to the room. And I really just wanted to thank everybody. I always enjoy my time with the House of Prayer so much. I appreciated so much, once again, being invited. And I don't know if anyone has any final thoughts or questions or words before we wrap up.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. And it was such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Hope to see you again.
Okay.
I think before we leave, I just want to say your wisdom is always spacious for us. It gives us the space to grow and to feel a renewed sense of our own agency and freedom. So thank you. Thank you.
God should give us the strength to do good things in our lives, because our lives is the most precious thing we have. And God should give all of us the strength to make our lives a blessing and pay it. What's the expression? Pay it ahead, that movie. Give blessings to everything we come in contact with during the course of our days. Well, God bless you all, and thanks so much.
Very much.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you again.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
we had some thank yous in the chat.
Yes.
And will we send out the, how do we handle the evaluation? Just send that, did that go out by email?
I think what I can do is follow up. I have everyone's names.
Okay.
So if I can retrieve their emails, because there were some new people that joined us for the first time. So I'll have to go and dig around, and maybe Catherine Stewart can help me do that. But yeah, then I think it'll be very simple. I think it'll just be, you know, what was most helpful, and, you know, would you join us again if you had the chance, that kind of thing.
Right. When we registered, my registration form registered me via my email.
Okay. Okay.
So everybody who registered that form, I don't know if you have access to it.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I'll ask Catherine to get for me. Yeah. But the time just flies with him. I don't know.
I know. Yeah. I enjoyed it. So maybe I could find the several questions that Stephanie put together. We could just use that and not have to invent a new thing. If you want to.
That'd be great.
She set it up on Google. She had on Google. You know.
I know. It's still. I have to take a tiny step, you know. But
well, my tiny step in relation to Google is always in the away direction, toward direction. But,
I'll see what I can find. I'll just see what I can find. But I think it was probably only 3 or 4 questions that we.
That's all it is. Yeah, very simple.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I'll do that follow up. And again, I thought it was. He's just easy to listen to, and I love how people really interacted with him. That was lovely.
Yeah, he's very easy to talk to, even from Arkansas.
Right.
In a little bitty square on a computer screen.
That's right. That's right. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.